Doom Eternal was developed by id Software and published by Bethesda, and this game is a high-octane, fast-paced, first-person shooter action-adventure game that was released earlier this year in 2020, and it serves as the sequel to Doom 2016, which is considered by many to be one of the best reboots in the history of video games. So, just speaking real briefly on Doom 2016, I did make a retrospective a few years ago for it, but that video is one of the first ones I did for these retrospectives, so the quality isn't as good as I would like it to be going back and looking at it now. Speaking real briefly on Doom 2016, Doom 2016 was a great ride for me. Initially, I played Doom 2016 on the Xbox One. My friend was able to get me a copy. He no longer plays video games now, but at the time he was still into the medium, and he was able to get me a free copy of the game on Xbox One. And so I first played the game on Xbox One. And after I started working earlier that year, I was able to actually pay for, a full copy of the game on PS4. And I replayed the entire thing and loved every minute of it. Doom 2016 was fantastic because it focused primarily on action and placing an emphasis on the player being able to quickly think on their feet. And Doom Eternal is exactly the same way. You really do have to think about what you're doing when you're playing this game. Honestly, when I first started playing this game, I was not enjoying it. I was actually dying a lot, and I was not getting the proper amount of ammunition that I needed to make progress. And then I realized about 30 to 40 minutes into my playthrough, I noticed that, oh, hey, you're not playing the game the right way. I had to change up my approach. I significantly had a lot more fun with the game as a result. When it comes to fairness, a lot of video games are designed in a way to where they're not a proper fair challenge to the player, and game developers do stupid things to artificially make the game more difficult. And one of the primary reasons, probably the best example that I can think of at the moment, would be the Souls series or any of the Souls games. Those games are the prime definition of artificial difficulty because they are purposely designed to handicap the player through slow movement, clunky movement, overpowered damage sponge enemies, and so on and so forth. Doom Eternal isn't designed this way. If you know how to play the game properly, it's a very rewarding experience because, like I said, you do have to think about what you're doing because every single gun in the game has a very specific function. And this is what I call smart design from the development studio that worked on this. Again, that being id Software. Every single gun is designed on purpose to deal with a specific enemy on screen. And this is something that's classic game design. Good video games are designed this way, where you have a new enemy that comes up on screen, and there's a very specific way that you're supposed to take that enemy down. And so you have various different enemy types in this game that are designed with weaknesses. Every single enemy has a weakness in this game. And in order to actually play the game the right way, you're supposed to exploit these weaknesses so you can get through the game successfully. And so you have some of the demons such as the Revenants. So the Revenant demons have these shoulder-based rocket weapons, which you're supposed to take those out, and that will automatically weaken them significantly. And then you can just whale them with gunfire from pretty much any weapon in your arsenal, and that'll take them down. You have another enemy type that has a shield, and you're supposed to use an energy-based weapon to destroy the shield, and then you're supposed to take them out using some controlled gunfire from like your shotgun. And this is how you're supposed to engage these enemy types every single time you see them on screen. Now, at first glance, it seems that takes away player choice, but what it does is it forces you to think about how to expend your ammunition correctly. And if you run out of ammo, there are enemies that are extremely weak that pop up on screen every once in a while, and then you're supposed to go up to them and use the chainsaw. The chainsaw is your way of getting more ammunition. And see, this is something I didn't realize when I first started playing the game. Unless the game I'm playing is this robust RPG that has a lot of depth to it, I'm not going to waste my time on tutorials, really for any video game that I play. And so I like to discover how to play games the natural way by skipping all the tutorial shit. And to me, that's part of the fun of learning how the game actually works instead of, the game just straight telling you, this is how you're supposed to play. Most of the time, I like to discover that sort of thing on my own. Doom Eternal was one of those games for me. The game also places emphasis on platforming. So when you're not engaged in combat, there are sections in the game where you're forced to engage in these platforming sections. For some of the people that didn't really care for this game, that was one of the most primary criticisms that I read about, was that certain people did not find the platforming sections to be enjoyable. But the platforming sections are pretty simple in how they're actually designed, and it does add that extra dynamic to the level design because this is a first-person shooter, so id Software clearly wanted to have a little bit more depth. That's something I really do appreciate them for attempting with this game in particular. And then you have your typical collectibles that are scattered throughout each level in this game, and the collectibles range from neat little things like miniaturized toy figures of all the different demon creatures that are in the game, to models of all the different weapons that you can acquire in the game. And so the collectibles were interesting, and some of them are extremely well hidden in the environment, and so that encourages multiple playthroughs of certain levels so you can acquire everything. And so content-wise, the game does have enough there for the single player. And the single player, honestly, is the best that I've seen this year so far. This is a game that encourages the player to take risks while not necessarily focusing on experimentation. And from a certain perspective, the lack of emphasis on player experimentation can also be considered to be a criticism, but that's not really something, to me, that's not really something that's a negative aspect of the game. And I'm not going to knock the game for not placing an emphasis on player experimentation. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the single player campaign for Doom Eternal is near flawless. There's really not much that I have to say that's actually bad or weak with the campaign. The campaign is pretty much great all the way around. It doesn't waste the player's time. There's really no padding in the single player campaign. There's no stupid side quest or some kind of artificial distraction that was inserted into the game to artificially extend the length of the game like you had in pretty much every single corner of the Final Fantasy VII remake or in some parts of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. The game isn't an open world game that's just bland and there's just a bunch of repetitive tasks everywhere. The game is a classic, level by level linear experience that's well constrained and controlled. The combat does force the player to think about which weapons they're using at all times, and you do have to pay attention to your ammunition count. And the game does force the player to move around simply because of all the numerous enemies that are on screen. Like, you can't just remain stationary and stand in one place, which you can get away with in other shooter-based games, but not in Doom Eternal. You really do have to move around, and that just adds to the overall action element of the game itself. And then the game does have some mild replayability, nothing that's too ridiculous, and some of the collectibles, unlike most games, are actually fun to acquire. And so there's nothing really bad that I have to say about the single-player campaign for Doom Eternal. It is near flawless. And then some of the superpowered weapons that you can unlock, those are fun to use as well. And so id Software did a fantastic job with the single-player campaign. Now I'm going to talk about the shitty fucking multiplayer mode, known as Battle Mode. Doom Eternal's multiplayer mode only has one variant. On one side, you have one single player playing as the Doomslayer, and then on the other side you have two other players on the same team as demons. And then there are other demons that spawn that are played by the computer, the CPU. The problem with this mode is that it's unbalanced. It's unbalanced to the point where it's no longer fun, and it's extremely frustrating. And then to give the players who are playing on the demon side, to give them more of an advantage, id Software decided to give them these buffs, which are absolutely ridiculous. For example, they can summon a shield in which they can stand inside the shield and regenerate health. That's one of the so-called buffs or whatever that they get to help them out, to aid them in battle. You have the AI that spawns demons consistently that fights on their side. And so it's pretty much you as the Doomslayer, if you're playing as the Doomslayer, fighting against a small army, a small brigade. It's not fun at all. At the end of each round, you can choose a specific perk that you want, some of which, will give you like an extra dash that's available for you to use, or will increase your speed. But those perks really don't help you out a whole lot. Really, the biggest problem with this mode is the fact that you have to take out both players on the demon side in order to win the round. If you kill just one of them, they can respawn. That person can respawn, and they respawn at full health. And so this mode is just bullshit. Complete trash. It's garbage. And I was reading before this game came out that id Software, they didn't want to make a standard team deathmatch for multiplayer. But my thing is, team deathmatch has been around for as long as it has for a reason. That's because it's a mode that works when it comes to really any multiplayer-based shooter. So it's like, why would you not put in a team deathmatch mode for your new game? It really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the multiplayer in this game really drags it down quite a bit from what otherwise is a damn near flawless experience. And so definitely got to knock the game for that. There was no reason for them to exclude team deathmatch, or at least try and put in some other, game variants. But they didn't even bother to try and do that. So, and not only that, but they also tied quite a few of the game's trophies to this shitty ass multiplayer mode. And so I wasn't able to obtain the platinum trophy and complete the game to 100% because of this stupid multiplayer mode. And so I definitely got to knock the game for that. All in all, Doom Eternal is great if you only are interested in the single player mode. But if you're trying to play the game for multiplayer, maybe you enjoyed the multiplayer from the first game, there's nothing here to really become engaged with, because it's just not designed well at all. I would rather play Mortal Kombat 11's shitty fucking Combat League than deal with this. So all in all, it's a great game just for the single player alone. But when you take the whole package together, yeah, that multiplayer really drags it down. And so that's what I got to say about Doom Eternal. If I make any more retrospectives between now and the time that The Last of Us Part 2 releases, it'll be on, obviously, a game that's older. And I already have one in mind, so I may make that video and upload it soon.